Hello and good morning, evening or afternoon, depending on when you are watching this Susty Talk from Edie. Susty Talks are our series of video interviews designed to keep us all feeling a bit more connected to the global sustainability conversation. We started them at the height of the first lockdown here in the UK in 2020, and we are still going strong now into summer 2022. And I'm delighted to be taking an international Susty Talk call today with Jenna Evans, who is the Global Sustainability Manager for Ben & Jerry's. So Jenna, thank you so much for your time. Whereabouts are you dialing in from?
Based in the United States, in northern Vermont, near the Canadian border.
Yeah, this is a definite long distance call for me. There's, I think, a 5-hour time difference. It's a rainy afternoon here for me in the UK and a bit of a grey morning for Jenna. So thank you so much for sparing the time. We're taking this call shortly after Ben & Jerry's announced a really interesting new initiative aimed at reducing emissions on dairy farms, which is, a significant chunk of the business's overall emissions. So it's great to have Jenna on the line to talk about that a little bit more. But I think it would be good to start with an introduction to yourself, Jenna. So a little bit more about how long you've been at Ben & Jerry's and what your role there entails.
Sure. Yep, like you said, I'm Jenna Evans. I'm the Global Sustainability Manager for Ben & Jerry's. I've been at Ben & Jerry's for about 4 years, but I had about 11 years of previous experience in dairy sustainability as well. And my role here primarily entails working on our climate strategy as well as sustainable packaging.
That makes sense, and I think it would be good as well to get some insight as to how the sustainability team is set up. So as a UK-based publisher, we've met a lot of the folks at Unilever here in the UK, which is obviously parent company. So it would be good to hear about how you interact with the parent company team and how your team is set up at the brand as well.
Sure. So yeah, Ben & Jerry's is a brand within Unilever. We're a bit unique in the way that we were acquired, that we have a bit of independence around our social mission. So my role sits on the social mission team at Ben & Jerry's, and that social mission team is actually governed by an independent board of directors. And so there is collaboration, but there's a lot of freedom as well within the brand. Yes, I would say for the sustainability team, formally, it is just myself. However, there's many people at Ben & Jerry's who work on sustainability, and it's integrated within their roles. And so I have a lot of collaborators in all different departments, whether it's manufacturing or our retail teams, R&D or marketing. So there's a lot of people that work on it, just it's not part of their official title.
That makes sense, and that's something I did want to talk about today. Essentially, we're speaking around a month after the brand announced a new pilot project to take down emissions on dairy farms, involving 15 supplier farms across the US and the Netherlands, by adopting new technologies and processes, which we can discuss in more detail. But I wanted to get a feel of how that worked behind the scenes. You mentioned the need to work with manufacturing and packaging design for some of your job, but I'm assuming that for dairy supply you need to work with the procurement team as well as with the suppliers directly. So it'd be great to hear a little about that.
Yeah, so I guess taking a step back, like our climate strategy is largely focused on dairy ingredients because they contribute more than 50% of our global climate footprint, or carbon footprint, you could say. And so it makes sense that with over 50% of our footprint coming from dairy, that we focus heavily on dairy when you're trying to reduce emissions. So yes, you're right. I work closely with our, we call it our values-led sourcing team here at Ben & Jerry's, and the folks at Unilever and Sustainable Sourcing. And we've collaborated together to develop this program and worked closely with farmers also. So the 15 farms that you mentioned are some of our best farms that have shown a history of being progressive in their fields. And so we're excited to be working with them over the next few years.
Great. And for people like myself that don't have a background in farming and supply chain innovation, it would be great to hear about the approaches that are being taken on farm. So I have a press release that noted things like regenerative methods of agriculture, so improving soil quality, thus resulting in the use of less commercial fertilizer. Also tackling methane, something that's often talked about when we talk about dairy, and yeah, manure management as well.
Yeah, so the easiest way, I guess, to think about it for myself is to look at the carbon footprint of a dairy farm. And so you can look to the academic literature to find, in general, where the emissions are coming from on a farm. And like you mentioned, methane is the biggest contributor from a dairy farm. It comes primarily from what we call enteric emissions, which just means cow burps. So cows burp out methane. It's part of their natural rumination process as they're digesting their food. And yeah, we are looking at different feed additives that can act as a digestive aid and adjust the processes within the rumen to decrease methane generation, and hopefully use that energy towards other processes like making more milk and helping the cow be more efficient with their feed. So that's one area. There's also methane emitted from cow manure, as well as nitrous oxides, and that's the second biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions on a farm. So we're looking at different manure management techniques, none of which I think are particularly new, but depending on where you are, not widely implemented, largely due to cost, especially in the United States. So we're trying to look at what, especially on this, we're working with a lot of small like family farms, basically, not giant farms. So in the U.S., our farm, I think our largest farm that we're working with is around 900 cows on the farm. And in the Netherlands, the farm size is even smaller, and that is, medium-sized when you think of how big the dairies can actually get, especially in the U.S. So we're working closely with them to try to see what solutions will work on a medium-sized farm. One reason why that is interesting is because previously many manure projects only made sense if you had a really large scale. And so a lot of small farms had kind of been pushed out of solutions because they just didn't have the economy of scale for it to make sense financially. So we're targeting those farms with different financing options, different technologies, and just an open mind about how to make the solution fit to the farm and not necessarily prescribing the same solution for every farm. And then, like you said, the third biggest source is around how they grow the crops to feed the animals. So regenerative agriculture is a big piece. We're trying to reduce synthetic inputs like fertilizer, pesticides, and things like that, and build the soil health as well as sequester carbon in the soil. Those are the three main areas. There's a few more, but I can stop there.
No, that makes sense. I was going to ask about the differences between farms in the US and the Netherlands, and you mentioned some of them there, that obviously the US has more land space. So the fact that 900 cows on a farm could be small or medium, I'm presuming there's a bit of a difference in how dairy is produced in these two national markets.
Yes, quite a bit. I'm not an expert, I guess, in necessarily U.S. dairy or Dutch dairy, so I can give you at a high level the farm sizes is a big difference. There's also a lot more regulation, I think, in the Netherlands around the way the farms operate. I know that we have a lot more data already existing due to regulation in the Netherlands. Like, for example, our farms there are already tracking their carbon footprint every year. So we have like a whole host, like a really big database to pull off of. Whereas in the US, this is more something new that a farm would be asked to feed in information to get their individualized carbon footprint. There's also more grazing that's happening in the Netherlands. This, of course, grazing in the US, but many of our farms in northern Vermont don't have the correct land base in order to be able to do that. And so, there's differences in management styles.
That makes sense. And I wanted to get information on how this could potentially be scaled up. As well, I think it's great that you mentioned why you're starting with smaller or more medium farms and how, yeah, every farm is different. essentially. So I wanted to get your view on how these learnings could be applied to scale it up. So maybe to dairy in other countries, maybe to farms of other sizes, or maybe to farms that you mentioned might not have been super involved in implementing progressive innovation for quite as many years.
Yeah, so one of the objectives of Mootopia is to really trial and learn. And so we don't expect everything that we're going to be doing with these farms is going to be, I was going to say a home run, but that might not translate over there in Europe. But it might not be a winner. Not every idea is going to be a winner. So part of what we're doing is to take data in, I guess, around the economics, and if it's like a feasible project for to help a farm thrive. We don't want to be implementing projects that are going to be detrimental to the farms, because that does not help the event, like the long-term sustainability of the farm, if we're not supporting them financially as well. So in terms of the scale up, we're hoping that Mootopia will show us which projects work and make sense, and that we'll be able to have this proven track record of things that work. And not only will that generate interest from additional farms, but also from dairy cooperatives and other players in the supply chain that can help with co-investment. I think one of the key things for any agricultural supply chain, not just dairy, but like any food product, really, there's going to have to be a lot of collaboration and co-investment in these supply chains, because it's never just one business's responsibility for the footprint in that supply chain. So I think that's going to be a key thing for future scale up as well.
Of course, we had our annual forum earlier this year. I feel like, yeah, collaboration and case studies were the two C's that came up the most. So I was going to ask for your advice for other professionals looking to start working with suppliers to measure and reduce emissions. And I know you've mentioned some of the big ones there, notably, yeah, trial and learn, and not prescribing one set solution from the top down. But did you have any other pieces of advice to add?
I mean, I would just say start conversations now. The next 10 years is super critical in the fight against climate change. We're really very close to a tipping point, and companies really need to be taking action now, in serious action. It's not something that we can delay. And so that's why we're giving it our best shot now. We're doing everything we can, investing very heavily, looking at innovative research and trying things on working farms. So I would encourage anybody that's in the sustainability field to reach out to suppliers, reach out to others in the supply chain that you could collaborate with, look for grants, but just start conversations. That's how this project got started.
Great, and I wanted to carry on there as well with starting now. We've talked about so much that can be done to reduce emissions from your dairy sourcing. As you mentioned, it's a major component of the brand's climate footprint. We engage with some groups and some organisations that say that, well, as doing this, we need to really consume less dairy, look at plant-based, look at other innovations here. So I wanted to also get a feel for what Ben & Jerry's is working on in terms of dairy-free products and innovation to reduce emissions.
Sure. Yeah, I think that is a huge part of the solution, that consumers are moving more towards plant-based diets. We've definitely been aware of that trend. We launched our first non-dairy ice cream back in 2016, which has an almond base, and followed it a few years later with a sunflower butter base. And so we have two different product lines right now that are non-dairy, and they're wonderful. One of the things we've been doing lately is mirroring our most famous flavors, like, for example, fish food, which is traditionally a dairy ice cream, and now it's available in non-dairy, and it's really, really amazing.
Yeah, there's been so much innovation in this space. Even on LinkedIn Daily News in the UK here, you get something about plant-based most days.
Yeah. It's evolving quite quickly, and it's a focus not only of Ben & Jerry's, but of Unilever.
Of course. Well, Jenna, that's all the questions I had noting down, and I'm aware that our time on the call is coming to an end. So thank you so much for your time and for your insight about Mootopia.
Thank you. It's lovely to talk to you.